Look at the word itself. Genos, meaning race or tribe. Side, meaning to kill. It is a precise legal taxonomy designed to separate the general casualties of war from the systematic destruction of a specific people. Yet this word did not exist before 1943. Polish jurist Raphael Lemkin coined it specifically because he needed a legal category for what he observed while studying the 1915 extermination of the Ottoman Armenians. This diagram outlines Article 2 of the 1948 UN Convention on Genocide. Its cornerstone is the intent to destroy. It sets the threshold at acts committed with the intent to destroy a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, in whole or in part. The events of 1915 provide the foundational case study for this law. The Armenian experience established the exact legal metric the international community uses today to identify and prosecute state-sponsored eradication. Who, after all, speaks today of the annihilation of the Armenians? Adolf Hitler posed that question to his military commanders in 1939, before invading Poland. Decades earlier, in 1915, Ottoman Interior Minister Talat Pasha made a similar calculation. He boasted to the American ambassador that he had accomplished more to solve the Armenian question in 3 months than the previous sultan had in 30 years. That Armenian question was born at the intersection of a vulnerable, concentrated minority population and a rapidly collapsing Ottoman frontier. As foreign powers intervened on behalf of the Armenians to demand reforms, the Ottoman state stopped viewing them as a subjugated religious minority. They became a perceived existential threat to the empire's survival. We can track this escalation through international law. Look at this demographic map of the Ottoman Empire and the Caucasus in 1878. The Armenian population is heavily concentrated here in the eastern provinces. Following the Russo-Turkish War, Article 16 of the Treaty of San Stefano mandated reforms to protect these populations. Crucially, those protections were enforced by the physical presence of Russian troops. Months later, rival European powers rewrote the agreement at the Congress of Berlin. Article 16 became Article 61, and Russian troops were ordered to withdraw. Military enforcement was replaced by the vague guarantee of supervision. Diplomacy substituted physical security with distant oversight. By legally demanding minority rights, but stripping away the only mechanism to enforce them, European capitals laid a trap. They directly incentivized the Ottoman state to solve the diplomatic dispute by erasing the population causing it. Sultan Abdul Hamid II sought to hold his fracturing empire together through a doctrine of pan-Islamism, violently suppressing non-Muslim minorities who demanded the rights promised in Berlin. Between 1894 and 1896, the Sultan deployed the Hamidiyya, brutal, state-funded, irregular cavalry units, directly against unarmed Armenian civilian populations. Over 300,000 Armenians were killed. On the UN framework, this aligns precisely with the first criterion, killing members of the group. The Hamidian massacres proved that violence against the Armenians had evolved into a centrally sanctioned strategy of demographic engineering. In 1908, the Young Turk Revolution forced the Sultan to restore a constitutional government. Minority groups briefly believed equal citizenship would finally protect them. That hope collapsed a year later during the 1909 Adana massacres. Tens of thousands of Armenians were slaughtered, while the new constitutional authorities largely stood by. The ruling Committee of Union and Progress, known as the CUP, abandoned Ottoman pluralism. Their ideology shifted rapidly toward Pan-Turkism. Pan-Turkism demanded the creation of a racially and linguistically homogeneous ethno-state, stretching from Anatolia all the way into Central Asia. Under this new doctrine, the state reclassified Armenians from religious outsiders into a racial barrier blocking the empire's geographic destiny. World War I provided the necessary geopolitical cover. Under the fog of global conflict, the CUP could execute internal demographic operations without the threat of international intervention. On April 24, 1915, the Ottoman government launched a decapitation strike. Hundreds of Armenian intellectuals, politicians, and clergy in Constantinople were arrested and subsequently executed. By eliminating the community's leadership, the state neutralized any capacity for organized resistance. fulfilling the UN criterion for causing serious bodily or mental harm. With the men conscripted or killed, the state ordered the remaining women, children, and elderly deported into the Syrian desert under the guise of resettlement. Along these death marches, the complete denial of food, water, and shelter was deliberate. The environment itself was weaponized. This aligns exactly with the legal definition of deliberately inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about physical destruction. The paper trail confirms central intent. Reports from U.S. Ambassador Henry Morgenthau and from Germany, Turkey's own wartime ally, detailed the systematic nature of the operations directed from the capital. The events of 1915 function as a sequenced, highly documented operation of state eradication that hits every single metric of modern genocide. In the immediate aftermath of the war, the Allies signed the Treaty of Sèvres, which included provisions for an independent Armenian state as restitution. Mustafa Kemal's rising nationalist forces rejected Sèvres outright, waging a war of independence, pushing out European occupiers and overrunning the newly declared Armenian Republic. When the powers reconvened in 1923 to sign the Treaty of Lausanne, the geopolitical reality changed. To secure relations with the newly formed Republic of Turkey, the Allies completely omitted the Armenian question from the final text. Lausanne established a chilling diplomatic precedent. It demonstrated that international mandates for justice can be entirely erased if a state possesses enough military leverage to force a new treaty. Within the borders established at Lausanne, the Turkish state crafted an official historiography. Premeditated extermination was reframed as a mix of reciprocal wartime casualties and necessary security relocations. Kemalist ideology embedded this denial into the foundation of the modern republic. Domestic laws were written to criminalize the acknowledgement of the genocide, ensuring the state's narrative remained unchallenged internally. While formal diplomacy buried the issue, the Armenian diaspora and independent scholars kept the historical and legal records alive, building the archives when governments refused to look at them. Gradually, international recognition broke through. Uruguay led the way in 1965, followed by France, Germany, Russia, and the United States, acknowledging the genocide. This global push aims to enforce accountability and break the cycle of impunity following state-sponsored eradication. The extermination of the Armenians exposes the ultimate vulnerability of international law. The truth of a crime does not depend solely on the evidence left behind. It depends on the political will of the global community to enforce its definition over the demands of geopolitics.